Welcome to Normal Island. I'm in a good mood because the Greens have just hit 140,000 members in the last few hours while reform councils are collapsing, and I'm loving it. I'm Ben Mclaine, and I'm honoured to be joined tonight by the other half of the Dream Team. It's Curtis Daly.
The
How you
other
holding
half of the
up?
dream team. I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
I've not had that before.
yeah. We'll just
Well,
try not to mention that to any of the others, including our current producer. Right.
yeah, and also anyone else is watching. Anyone watching, don't mention to the other contributors that we're the real dream team. I swear to God, all we do is slag each other off.
Yeah, I mean that's true. That's true. But that just makes it more. It's
Fun.
affectionate fighting. I think. Yeah, it's been a heavy time though.
Mm.
So let's go on with it. Um, don't forget that Curtis and I will be responding to your comments and questions at the end, so do drop them into the chat. But coming up on tonight's show, welcome to Citizenship Prison, the proposed changes to indefinite leave to remain, a 300-page answer, Bridget Phillipson's cowardly response on trans rights, and Dangerous Polanski. The Times is fearmongering over Zack's ideas once again. As ever, please don't forget to like and share the stream. Become a subscriber. It really helps us out, and you can help us grow by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work, or by becoming a YouTube member. Let's go on to our first story. Cool. We are told time and time again that the antidote to the far right is to imitate their politics. And yet, all it seems to be doing is making us right wing and more stupid. Recently, this has culminated with the UK political media class attacking indefinite leave to remain, following the lead of Nigel Paul Farage. Yes, his middle name is Paul. Too often we talk in the abstract about these things, so it was interesting to hear from Telegraph journalist Cara McGugan about how it might affect her and her American husband in a more personal way. McGugan wrote, under Farage's plans to scrap ILR, my husband could have to reapply for a visa every 5 years. This is a massive financial burden. A spousal visa costs £1,938, along with a £3,105 surcharge for access to the NHS for the duration of the visa. People on this visa already pay above the average citizen for access to the NHS because the surcharge is in addition to regular income tax, which of course everyone else pays. This 5-year cycle would make our lives together insecure. It will be hard to get a mortgage or plan to have children, knowing that he will have to continuously reapply for the right to live here. Before we even get into ILR, can we just wake up to the reality that we treat immigrants appallingly in this country? £5,000 for the same access to the NHS that you and I are automatically entitled to. And you might hear people say, oh, but they haven't paid into the system. Well, neither have we. When we work, we are a net when we start work, we are a net deficit on the NHS. We still don't get charged for healthcare, and immigrants are generally net contributors to our public services because they've been cared for by their home country from childhood, if you see what I mean. All of their care right up to adulthood is, and when they start paying tax at least, is dealt with by the state. So if it's their home state, it means that they are ultimately being paid for by another country, and then they're coming here and being net contributors to our country. Under Farage's plans, not only would indefinite leave to remain be scrapped, but citizenship would be made an even worse prospect. Farage is proposing that people applying for citizenship should have to give up the citizenship of their home country. In other words, there should be no dual citizenship allowed for those applying to become UK citizens. It makes the prospect of living in the UK seem like a prison, where we're scared that immigrants will hate us so much here that they'll try to leave. I mean, would you give up your British citizenship if you moved somewhere else, potentially cutting you off from your family at home? I wouldn't personally. I don't think I know many British people that would. And I think that's a deranged thing to expect immigrants coming here to go through. And as usual with Farage, it's complete hypocrisy because his own children are dual citizens of the UK and Germany. It is once again with Farage, rules for thee, but not for me. There really is no reason to make the life of people moving here worse than it's already going to be. But as McGugan pointed out, it's not just Farage. The rhetoric around ILR is a concern beyond reform. Both Labour and the Conservatives have proposed increasing the time before foreign citizens can apply for ILR, from 5 years to 10. For us, this would mean 2 more spousal visas and more than £10,000 in fees. By comparison, if we opted to live in the US, I will soon be eligible to apply for a green card that could cost less than $2,000 for 10 years. £10,000 for no good reason, just to deter people from moving here, and not unskilled people, by the way. In addition to this, Labour wants to make them train British workers as part of their process of gaining settled status. The think tank, the Good Growth Foundation, which has links to the Labour right, showed that work and teach proposals do significantly reduce voter concerns about immigration, and laid out their proposals like this. We propose a new immigration pathway where skilled foreign workers can be granted a visa on the condition that they dedicate a specific proportion of their working hours to training and mentoring local employees. For example, a foreign engineer hired to fill a technical vacancy might be required to spend 10 to 15% of their week teaching specific software skills or advancing manufacturing techniques to a cohort of junior domestic engineers. Now, I don't think this proposal is entirely awful as like an optional pathway. If you're going to make it optional, I don't see that as too much of a problem. But not everyone is made for teaching. You can be a very skilled engineer, but a terrible communicator. The bigger problem, though, is that combined with the changes to indefinite leave to remain, it just deters immigration. We have massive shortages in our NHS and our care sector, and also in other areas that don't often get mentioned, like transport, logistics, robotics, automation, and high skilled software developers as well, data analysts. The way our political class is acting, you'd think we were swimming in engineers and software developers. Like, you can't wave your LGBT flag without hitting 4 GPs. You'd think that care workers were going door to door like Jehovah's Witnesses looking to people to care for. It's just so disconnected from the reality of Britain where nothing works because everything's understaffed and everything's underfunded. Curtis, help me understand. Why do our political class act like this, and what do you make of the proposed changes to indefinite leave to remain?
Well, we'd be forever scratching our heads to try and understand the political class. But I can try and give you some insight. Let's talk about immigration more broadly, and then I'm going to zoom into the point about indefinite leave to remain. So, what is the Labour Party trying to do? When you try and gain political capital, you have to make a political calculation. Now, for the Labour Party, their political calculation is to tack right on immigration. They want to seem relevant because, of course, the Overton window has moved to the right on immigration. Very quickly, we've gone from talking about just tackling illegal immigration, saying, if you come here, work hard, pay taxes, that's all that matters. And now we're attacking legal migration. We're attacking people that have the right to be here. Reform recently said that they want to deport 600,000 people, which is crazy stuff, by the way. And we can talk about the economics in a second. So, what is Labour's political calculation? Their calculation is we want to be relevant, we want to stay inside that Overton window, and we are going to tack right on immigration. And yet they still don't understand that when it comes to hemorrhaging votes, they're losing more votes to the left, to the Lib Dems and to the Greens. They are chasing an invisible voter. Now, look, it is absolutely true, I think, that Labour are still seen as a pro-migration party, regardless of the facts, regardless on policy, whether they are or not. I still think they will be seen as pro-migration. The media and the right-wing media will always attack them for being pro-migration. There's this insidious narrative that the political class, the Labour Party, care more about immigrants and asylum seekers than British people. We can probably unpack that in a second, but that is the narrative being spun. So no matter what they do on immigration, they will always be seen as pro-migration. And guess what? Reform are going to outflank them, and it contributes to the Overton window being shifted to the right. Let's look back to 2010, 2015, when Ed Miliband was Labour leader. It came to austerity, right? David Cameron said, we need to live beyond our means. And that was the narrative that worked for people. And the Labour Party, instead of saying, look, we don't need austerity, it's a stupid economic policy, it's unnecessary, it's harmful, it's dangerous, they said, we're going to cut, but just not cut quite as much. So they already accepted the framing of austerity, moving the Overton window to the right. And then, and I'm not the first one to say this, people said, well, I'm going to vote for the Conservatives because they're the real austerity makers. Why vote for fake austerity when you can vote for the real thing? No one's going to vote for Labour based on immigration. They won't. They're going to vote for reform based on immigration. So their political calculation is one of fantasy. It's not based on logic. They're losing political capital to the left to try and win voters from the right. Now, in terms of the specific policy, here's the problem, and you're right. We're now saying to those that want to come here, you have extra duties. You now have to spend 10 to 15% of your time teaching other people. I can tell you right now, I can sit here and talk politics, but as soon as someone says, can you explain something to me? I am terrible. I am awful. If someone says, can you give me a step-by-step on how to use this particular software or whatever? I don't know why, but my brain goes blank. You're right, not everyone's cut out for it. But also, here's the real problem I find, is that, one, surely we want to make sure that people are in full employment. Isn't there a risk that those might take less hours for a job to spend time on teaching? Or they're spending more of their time, their free time, teaching other people, which, again, okay, it's a social value, teaching other people. But if we were to look at this in an economic sense, I like the idea of, those who are going to work, they get paid. Obviously, they pay their taxes, they pay their bills, but also the extra money is spent on leisure. It's spent on food. It's spent on going to restaurants and pubs or whatever, doing activities, which has an economic multiplier. If people are spending more of their free time teaching other people, which I don't know what the financial incentive there, are they getting paid for it? I don't know. Then I think that is a problem for the economy. Really, this is about, I don't think this policy is particularly cruel, but I think this is part of a wider package of creating a hostile environment for immigrants to say, well, actually, I'm not going to bother coming here because there's extra duties I have to do, which, by the way, I don't think that's a deterrent. People don't really think like that. Most people won't know the immigration policy of another country because most people in this country don't know our own immigration policy. So I don't think people are going to know about it anyway. But the idea it's going to deter people, I don't think is going to happen. But the problem is, let's just accept that it does deter people. That means we're going to have huge employment gaps in key areas. Now, I can hear people say, but Curtis, that's the point, right? Surely we want those born here or citizens here to have access to jobs. Why are we prioritizing immigrants? One, I think the framing's wrong. We're not prioritizing immigrants. We're simply saying there's a labor market. We need to fill the labor market with jobs. But secondly, I agree. I do like the idea that, those who are born in this country have access to jobs, but this is a long-term strategy. And this goes at the heart of the right-wing project in terms of immigration. Now, Reform, in their last manifesto, they were looking at basically austerity on steroids, yet they also wanted to reduce migration. As I mentioned earlier, they were looking at deporting 600,000 people. That is not a coherent policy. If you want to bring down migration, again, it's not my politics, but if you, who was watching, want to bring down migration on a huge scale, you're going to have to see state spending like never before. The state is going to have to spend so much money. Taxes are going to go up because we have an aging population, social care is in crisis, and if we just got rid of loads of immigrants, we need to make sure that people in this country who are already legally here or are born here, whatever, can fill those jobs. And that means investment. That also means don't saddle people with debt. If you've got a doctor who went to university, why are we indebting these people? We should be encouraging these people into jobs. And thirdly, time, right? This is not a political project that can happen in 5 years or one parliament, right? When Nigel Farage and Reform say we're going to deport 600,000 people, right? That's not going to happen in 5 years. It's impossible. It will not happen. If you want to see that level of deportations, again, not my politics, but if you want to see that level of deportation, you have to say, we're going to spend loads of money, we're going to have to raise taxes in some places, especially a wealth tax, and we're going to have to wait because it's going to take generations to train up our own doctors and nurses. This is not an overnight thing. This is basically saying we need to transform our economy. This is basically saying we need to leave or abandon global capitalism, which, ironically, the ones that are mostly anti-immigration are also supporters of the current economic system. The Conservatives and Reform do not address this. So yes, if you want to see immigration come down, tax rises, massive public investment, long-term thinking, and looking at the fundamental setup of our economy, which none of them want to do.
It's interesting to me that when I was looking at the think tank that came up with the work and teach policy, they're the Good Growth Foundation. They've got connections to the Labour front bench, and throughout it, they were sort of like there were these little quote bubbles which showed different voters explaining why they chose not to vote Labour, and it was saturated with voters who had voted Labour but had turned to Reform. It's like there is a very clear focus on those types of voters, and all other concerns kind of seem to go out the window as soon as immigration is mentioned. The cost out the window, the morality out the window, NHS out the window, everything just as soon as immigration is mentioned. And I think it really does underline the need to move away from the conversation around immigration generally and moving it towards the NHS and cost of living, whilst also sticking up for the rights of immigrants. Speaking of which, I did just have one more question. Do you think that visas should actually cost anything? Because I'm not sure if I'm taking a radical position here, but I don't think there should be a payment barrier to moving to a country. I think maybe it should be based on like maybe there should be skills barriers, possibly like possible qualification barriers or something, um, or sector-based skills or something along those lines. But the idea of having people pay to move to a country, and of course criminal record as well, like I just think the reasons that we're barring people out are probably the wrong reasons. But I don't know if maybe that's a radical idea for the far future.
I mean, I don't think it's a radical idea. We've heard many radical ideas. I wouldn't put that into the box. For me, in terms of visa costs, I mean, I'm not particularly offended by visa costs, so I don't see much of a problem with it. The problem I have with the visa costs is how much it is. Now,
Mm,
if you want to slap on a small fee to cover the admin costs, sure, fine. I mean, I went to Australia. I know it was only like a 2-year working holiday visa. Wasn't very expensive, maybe a couple of £100. If you cap it at that, fine. But looking at thousands of pounds, looking at £5,000, that's extortionate. That is ridiculous.
mm,
Look, maybe I mean the policy Australia has is the visa itself isn't too expensive, but they expect you to have certain money in your bank account. Say save up 2 grand. When I got there, I think I had $2,000, which is £1,000. It's very good if you take British money to Australia, fantastic because it doubles your money essentially. I know obviously the cost of living is expensive, but wages in terms of cost of living is also a lot better.
mm.
So yeah, maybe I wouldn't have a problem saying, look, as long as you've got a couple of grand in your account or some sort of money in there to support yourself, fine. I do think slapping on 5 grand for a bit of paper is excessive. So maybe just cap it, make it cheap, cover the admin costs, and maybe that's about it.
Yeah, I think that's probably a reasonable position. And I'm sure we could talk about this all day, but there's going to be comments at the end that we'll
Mm.
address. So we'll go on to our second story. Izzy Dine is a journalist and writer who had recently started a YouTube channel called Izzy Dine Grills, where she invites powerful people on to ask them questions in a more public forum. Why am I telling you this? Well, because her first guest was the Women and Equalities Minister, Bridget Phillipson. Dine's interview with Phillipson was released yesterday, and the question of trans rights was one topic they touched upon that was picked up on by Pink News. In light of the Supreme Court ruling and the the EHRC, excuse me, withdrawing their original advice that suggested that it would be inappropriate for trans men to use either the men's or women's bathroom, trans people have been left in limbo as to what they do in terms of bathrooms. Without that advice, they really don't have any clarity. Dine took Phillipson to task on this question, and it's fair to say that Phillipson couldn't answer.
You do have one other role, which is that you're also the Minister for Women and Equalities. Now, you said in a statement in April that you think trans women shouldn't use the women's bathroom. Now, I'm a trans woman, and I just was curious what bathroom you think people like me should be using.
Yeah, so as Minister for Women and Equalities, I set out the government's position in responding to the Supreme Court judgment. The Supreme Court were clear that for the purposes of the Equality Act, sex was biological sex. What's now happening is that the Equality Human Rights Commission have consulted on a code of practice, which they've submitted to me as the Minister. I'll then be going through that line by line to make sure we get that right. It's a 300-page document, so it will take some time. But that's the means by which we will resolve the questions that people are raising in a range of areas.
Well, I mean, one of the suggestions, for example, has been that you could have a situation where trans people can't use the men's or the women's bathroom. I mean, that seems kind of preposterous, right?
So through the code of practice that the EHRC have submitted to me, that's the means by which we'll make sure that everyone has access to the services, the support that they need. Everyone should be treated with dignity and respect. Single-sex spaces are important, but I do believe that trans people should not be subjected to harassment or discrimination, and trans people continue to retain protections under the Equality Act 2010. And that is important. I wouldn't want anyone to feel that they don't get the support or the services that they need, and we'll set out the government's position in responding to the code of practice.
I look forward to that. So am I going to have to use the men's?
The code of practice will set out the way forward. We're taking our time to go through that, but the Supreme Court judgment was clear that sex under the Equality Act means biological sex.
Okay, well, we'll move on.
The Supreme Court ruling was supposed to offer clarity, right? It was supposed to make things clearer. But it doesn't seem to have made anything clearer. You've got Bridget Phillipson saying that she needs a 300-page ruling to say whether she should use the women's bathroom or the men's bathroom. But I don't think that's the real problem. I don't think it's so complicated that Phillipson needs more time to review it. It's actually very simple. Phillipson can't look a trans person in the eye and say that we supported your rights being stripped away. Because when they said clarity, they didn't mean clarity in terms of like making it easier for trans people or women or for trans women, cis women, trans men, cis men to know what bathroom to use, right? That wasn't what they meant. What they meant was it's a clear fuck you to trans people. It's designed to make their lives harder. And Phillipson simply can't look a trans person in the eye and say, we supported your rights being stripped away. We know what the answer is. Dine will have to use the men's because Lady Voldemort had a meltdown on Twitter. Maybe the disabled toilets if they're really trying to cop out of saying what they mean. And speaking of Voldemort, let me remind you how she reacted when the Supreme Court decision was passed. And this is why we say that J.K. Rowling is Andrew Tate for white women. Literally the same vice signaling, trolling, hateful, freaky vibes, right? But it's different when you have to look someone in the eye and say that they'll have less rights and you won't do anything about it. Isn't it, Bridget? It suddenly becomes very real. Curtis, we'll get to trans people's rights, but this is also the case for migrants and benefit claimants, isn't it? Everyone wants to talk in the abstract. Muslims as well. Everyone wants to talk in the abstract about this, and it's interesting how it's different when you're face to face with one of the good ones, as the saying goes. When they're actually made to look people in the eye, these people are fucking cowards.
Well, I mean, I disagree with you where she said she couldn't look that person in the eye. She did look her in the eye and straight up said you should be used in the men's bathroom. Okay, she didn't say it, but the question was, as a trans woman, am I forced to go in the men's bathroom? And she said, basically, the court ruling is final. It's biological sex. And she looked her in the eye when she said that. So it's even worse. It's not even that they show some kind of empathy there. She just straight up said it. You're absolutely right. So the framing of this debate in this country is that you've got the sort of transphobe and the gender critical side. They are the common sense people, right? Man is a man, woman's a woman. Social progressives like us on the left, we have the crazy weird position. A man can't be a woman. That's the narrative. But it's extremely ironic that basically if you take the policy of the gender criticals, it's not common sense. It's added less clarity. Let's think about this for a second. So beforehand, when we could just say, you can go into the bathroom you identify, that was it. That was literally it. Wasn't a bother. Never really said anything. We had that policy for years and people got on with their lives. Now the Supreme Court ruling has happened. Well, what the hell's going on? Now you've added far more complexity to the issue. Now you're going to have, well, because of the Supreme Court ruling is it doesn't matter if you've socially transitioned, if you pass as the other sex, basically what is between your legs is final. And how do you police that? Seriously, are we going to be inspecting people's genitals? So can you tell me how that's common sense? I don't think, look, if you ask most people, I think due to, let's be honest, the increase of transphobia in the media, people's views are probably swayed on this. So if you ask most people, is a man a woman, is a woman a man, whatever, right? They'll probably take the sort of gender critical line. But then if you say, do you support, I don't know, vigilantes or toilet police, fucking toilet police looking between people's legs, majority of people are going to be like, no, because not only is this harmful to the wider public, it's harmful to women. So I find this incredibly ironic. Now, unfortunately, it's one of those things which the gender criticals, the transphobes, the right wing have over us in terms of narrative. Because if you go on TV and someone says, "Can a woman have a penis?" and someone goes, "Well, no, of course not. No, a man's got a dick, a woman's got a vagina. That's it." That's seen as common sense. And then obviously recently Zack Polanski went on Piers Morgan. He goes, "No," and obviously tries to explain himself. Usually you get cut off. In terms of narrative, yeah, we are in the weaker position because people are like, that's crazy, that's weird. But when you follow the policy to its logical conclusion, this is what you get. As you said, 300-page document. You're getting Bridget Phillipson and other people sidestepping the issue, saying, well, I'm not really going to directly answer your question, but I'm going to refer to the Supreme Court, which now adds more complexity. It puts trans people in a situation where they don't know where to go. And also, what I find really frustrating is Bridget Phillipson there and other people saying, even though we're going to hold up this gender critical line of biological essentialism, we respect trans people. Now, I'm sorry, but you can't respect a particular group, particularly trans people, if the policies and legislation doesn't also support it. It's like saying, we're not going to give you equal rights, but we mean well. That means fuck all, doesn't it? It really means nothing. It's kind of the politics we've had from the political class for so long, especially the Labour Party. The Labour Party can say stuff like, of course, we don't want to demonise immigrants, whilst also pushing through policies that demonise immigrants. They'll say, we care about the vulnerable people, whilst also pushing people into poverty. Remember, child poverty is at an all-time high. This is supposed to be the Labour Party. I know people were disappointed in the party, but the idea that they were going to oversee the highest rate of child poverty in history, I'm not surprised. So the rhetoric doesn't match the policy. To steal one of your lines, by the way, which also I think you stole from somebody else, and we're all sharing each other's lines here. When you come across someone, because there's going to be people, especially who you say they're on the left, watching this and saying, you guys are crazy, they buy into gender critical arguments. A surrogate mother, right? Someone who's adopted a child. Do we say they're not really mothers? Someone says, "This is my son," and then they go, "Look, I adopted this my son 5 years ago." Would it be reasonable to say, "You're not really a mother. You're not biologically a mother. You are not a mother. You are just pretending to be one. This is not common sense. This is wokeness." You'd be like, what the hell? The reason why we call them a mother, because it's socially accepted to care for someone, right? There are social norms that we buy into, and that relates to trans people, right? You are the identity that you identify with because you are adhering to societal norms of what a particular gender is, regardless of your biology. And then there's obviously other arguments where you say, actually, you can change your biology because, due to science, we can physically change our biology. I mean, we're changing our biology when we take medicine, for example, in a small way. So this is the logical conclusion of the transphobic gender critical argument, which has thrown up more questions, which has put more people in danger, not just trans people, but cis women too. But the point isn't a logical, common sense approach. The point is just being cruel.
Yeah, I do feel like if our definitions are going to be useful, they've got to be looked at in terms of their utility value. And the utility value of a trans-inclusive definition is just so much wider than the insistence that, no, the world is the way that I thought it was from birth, and I've come up with an idea of how the world should be, and I want to twist the world and kind of make it fit my theory of how the world should be. And of course, the point is, in this case, is to basically exclude trans people from public life. I do still disagree. I think that Bridget Phillipson is being cowardly because she's not owning up to it. If you see what I mean, she's not
Yeah.
being full frontal about it. Like if she was being full frontal about it, she'd be taking the J.K. Rowling position, which effectively what the government has done is taken the J.K. Rowling position without the cigar and the soft Andrew Tate stuff. And gone, well, and said, oh, well, you're a man. Because that is, I mean, clearly that's what Bridget Phillipson thinks. Or at least that's what she's been told in terms of policy to put forward as. And I think that's, I think if you're going to be transphobic, you should just do it with your full chest. Just do it with your full chest so that we can stop pretending that the Labour Party is anything other than reform/conservative light in terms of its policy making nowadays. The standard way of making a policy in the Labour Party now seems to be to ask the question, what would Nigel Farage do? Soften that policy by about 5% and then put it out to the public. It's wild. It's wild. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else on that story. I'm happy to move on if you are.
Well, I'll be just going to jump on what you're saying about the Overton window again. It's basically Nigel Farage jumps, Labour say how high. That's a bit. And this is why it's important to have a left-wing alternative to move that Overton window back, because this is the difference between weather vanes. Those that just follow the mood, follow the media, follow other politicians, spineless people. That is the entire cabinet of the Labour Party. But it's also not just the Labour Party, it transcends them, it's the entire political class. 99% of the political class, 97% of Parliament don't have a spine. They hate standing up for things. God forbid they might be unpopular in something, but you try and fight for it. I mean, even Nigel Farage has said things that are deeply, deeply unpopular, and he's fought for them. And he's pushed the Overton window. That's why we need someone on the left. I mean, I think people criticise the left by saying Nigel Farage is a great communicator. I'm sorry, he is. We just need a left-wing version of him.
Yeah, I do also think that one of the issues that crops up is people confuse, I think, talking about the economic issues and putting the issues that people care about with breaking solidarity with trans people, with immigrants, with all sorts of other groups, particularly trans people, I've noticed. And you see Democrats in the US do this a lot. But if you look at the successful Democrats and sort of successful left-wingers, you've got Bernie Sanders, Zoran Mamdani, AOC, people like Mehdi Hassan, people like Zack Polanski. And these people barely ever get asked about trans rights. But if they do get asked about trans rights, they just say they're standing in solidarity with trans people. They are unambiguous in terms of their support and solidarity with trans people. And that is ultimately the way it should be. Do you know what I mean? It should be you never break solidarity, but you always redirect the focus onto something else that is an issue that people should be getting angry about, so that when people think back about the conversation, they're not thinking about trans people, immigrants, whatever demographic the right wing are attacking benefit claimants, but they're thinking, oh, well, that conversation I just listened to, that was about wealth taxes. And then it starts to relate to their everyday life, if you see what I mean. Moving the conversation is very different from abandoning marginalized people.
Yeah, completely. I can't add to that. It's Ben's on fire again.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. Cool. If I've worn Curtis down, we'll move on to the next story. It has to happen at some point. Sorry. Before we continue, we would like to remind our viewers that we are five unpaid volunteers keeping this ship going. We do this around our paid jobs. Our goal is to become full-time, meaning we can increase our content, be far more ambitious, and build a sustainable left-wing alternative. Your help has already made so much difference. From equipment to covering rallies and interviews, your support means everything, and it's got us to where we are. This wouldn't be possible without you. We rely on small donations, so if you want to be part of a media organisation that seeks to destroy the oligarchs, then please head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can support us monthly on Patreon, or there is another link for a one-time contribution. You can also become a YouTube member for 99p. And by the way, if you can't do any of that, just like, share the stream, share our content, repost our content. It helps massively. So let's go on to our third and final story. It's another day and another attack on Zack Polanski. This one came from the Times with an opinion piece titled Greens policies hold grave dangers and must be taken seriously. Well, Zack saw this headline and he posted it on Instagram with the caption, Another day, another clutching of pearls hit piece. Today, courtesy of the Times. I'm not sure if the Daily Mail or the Express are on the rota for tomorrow. It's good because not only is it funny, but it also calls them out as predictable. If you make the first move, everything your opponent is doing looks reactive. If the Telegraph or the Express, prints an article tomorrow attacking Zack Polanski, they're now in a weaker position because Zack has already called them out on it. This is part of the point. It's part of the strategy. So what is this terror that Zack Polanski will bring to UK politics? Well, let's take a closer look at that Times article. The Greens, who won 4 seats in last year's election, are no longer the party that most voters might consider anodyne, and nice. Their new leader is calling for a wealth tax, heedless of the failure of similar policies the world over, and denounces his opponents, not least in Reform UK, as fascists and racists. He accuses the UK government of aiding and abetting a genocide in Gaza. With all the flair and fluency of a former actor, Mr. Polanski is polarizing and coarsening political discourse. So, in a country that had race riots last year, in which people tried to burn down hotels full of refugees, that supported Palestinian children getting blown apart by munitions, and where 31%, almost 1 in 3 UK children are living in poverty, calling for a wealth tax is a dangerous idea and is coarsening political discourse. Are you kidding me? I wonder why the Times, owned and run for the benefit of the multi-millionaire and billionaire class, might be opposed to a wealth tax. The Times article then goes on. His gospel of class envy, preached with self-righteous moral clarity and without regard for economic and fiscal reality, is attracting legions of idealistic new believers. We're believers now, guys. Millions of Britons in their 20s and 30s who have been frozen out of the housing market and condemned to unfulfilling work on stagnant wages. As one of those people, I can't help but feel that this article was written by some trust fund dweeb who has never had to work a real job in their life, calling it class envy on the one hand, but also saying that millions of young people are stuck in poverty and unable to access housing. Like, how do you hold those two ideas in your head at once without connecting them? Envy implies it's unjustified, but where did all that housing go? It didn't evaporate. Shelter estimates that there are 10 empty houses for every 1 homeless family in the UK. Who owns those empty houses? They didn't just evaporate. Multimillionaires and billionaires own the houses. Who is suppressing their wages while making record profits? Multimillionaires and billionaires. The Green leader has mooted leaving NATO and cannot define what a woman is, and with government borrowing at a 5-year high, his threadbare economic prospectus of high tax and fantastical levels of spending is a recipe for fiscal meltdown. Okay, so firstly, leaving NATO is not on the cards. That's not Green Party policy. That's Zack's personal view. It doesn't become policy unless members vote for it. And also, he just wants an alternative. He doesn't want to just suddenly jump out of NATO. He wants to build up an alternative and then move across. I've seen Zack speak about this before, so I know. Zack can define what a woman is. That's point 2. Trans-obsessed chucklefucks love to say that you don't know what a woman is if you disagree with their definition. But that's not him not knowing. That's you whinging that he won't accept your genital mania definition. That's not the same thing. He knows what a woman is. He just disagrees with your definition. These whiny snowflakes just can't accept that somebody might disagree with them. Also, we've done 15 years of austerity. It's just made everything worse. Nothing works. Everyone hates it. If you haven't realized by now that you need to invest in infrastructure and education to grow the economy, frankly, you're unqualified to be a banker in a game of Monopoly, let alone comment on economics. Zack? Zack? You're not Zack. Curtis, what do you make of these attacks on Zack Polanski, and do you think he's taking the right angle in response?
It was soy woke right-wing nonsense. I mean, in that article, and Jeremy Clarkson penned an article in the Times attacking Zack Polanski as well, attacking his teeth, and other physical appearances. There was no evidence, there was no facts, there was no argument. It was just moaning. Oh, he wants to raise taxes. Oh, poor billionaires. Bring an argument, right? Because the left does like to debate, by the way. I've always thought the right wing doesn't like to debate. They like to shout you down. But let's have a debate on wealth tax. I'm all here for it. I'm sure Zach is as well. But all it is just moaning. And I think the Times, look, Times is a Murdoch rag. It's dressed up, it's better. But the Times used to at least have the veneer of respectability. Even though it was mostly waffling nonsense, it felt like it was written better. Now they just don't care. They're upset. I mean, there's so much crap to go through. In terms of, raising taxes, it being fiscally irresponsible, that is crazy after, as you said, 15 years of austerity. We've had a failed economic system, one of privatization, one of public spending cuts, and reducing taxes on the wealthy. How has that worked? Because the Times acknowledged, right, that young people are being priced out of getting a home. Do people think this economic system works? No one thinks it works, yet it wants to say the alternative, because what is the opposite of tax cuts and reducing spending? It's spending more and increasing taxes. That's the opposite. That doesn't work either. Again, I want to hear an argument as to why these economic policies are bad, rather than Zach is envious and Zach is being mean to billionaires. Now, let's just be very, very clear here when it comes to reducing inequality. This has nothing to do with being envious, right? This is not about saying, I wish I was rich, I wish I was a billionaire, we're going to tax them because it's not fair, throw the toys at the pram. That's not how it works. Number one, we shouldn't have billionaires. And this isn't a moral argument, right? You can frame it that way if you want, but I'm more interested in the economic argument. Having the existence of billionaires means there's too much power concentrated through in the hands of the few. When you have multi-millionaires and billionaires, it means they buy everything. They own everything. And that means ordinary working class people, middle class people cannot participate in the economy in a meaningful way. They can't get their own assets. There was the right wing love to buy into this myth that wealth is created, right? I've heard it on Fox News before, which is that the rich create wealth. You cannot create wealth because wealth is different to money, right? You could say you can print money and you can put more money into circulation, but that's not creating wealth. In fact, even though I like some of the ideas of modern monetary theory, I think endless quantitative easing is actually bad. It can increase inequality, right? Maybe that's another discussion for another day. But that's not increasing wealth. You cannot create wealth because wealth is usually tied to resources in assets, and you can't just share it. We don't live in an abundant world. And by the way, that word abundance might be triggering because the libs have now adopted the abundance. We just need to, which is funny, by the way. They think this new idea is just more neoliberalism. It's tax cuts, deregulation, and basically, hopefully companies will build loads of stuff. That's never works. I mean, we have more scarcity, I think, than we've had in the last couple of decades. We've not had, it's not through a lack of resources, it's the hoarding of resources. So when you have the existence of billionaires and multimillionaires, that means the resources, the assets are controlled by the top 1%, the 0.1%, whatever you want to characterize it as. And that's why it's so important to reduce inequality. Wealth taxes is not about bringing in money. I made this case on Monday. Zach's made this case. I think Richard Murphy is currently on Bold Politics right now. He will make this case. Taxation is not bringing about money to the treasury. We can spend money anyway. We tax afterwards, in fact, because we want to control inflation and we want to leverage good on bad behavior. Taxes is literally just to reduce inequality because money equals power. We shouldn't have, because it's not just about abolishing billionaires, by the way. We shouldn't have someone with £100 million. And again, this isn't crazy hard left thinking. This isn't envious. In fact, I would hate to be a multimillionaire. I think it'd be depressing. I think there'd be so much burden on my shoulders to think all the poverty out there and I can solve it with my money. I guess maybe if you're a multimillionaire or billionaire, you you kind of had to exploit loads of people and you're just a psychopath, so you don't care. But I don't want to be that rich. I just want to be comfortable. I want to get a house and have a decent paying job, which is what the 99% of people want. Right? Guarantee if you ask most people, they say, what wage do you want? People will say like maybe 70 to 100 grand, max 150. But people aren't aspiring to be multi-millionaires, I don't think. I think people are aspiring to have an economy that works for them. And you can only have that if you reduce inequality, you reduce the power of the multi-millionaires and billionaires, because guess what? A billionaire can call it the prime minister. We can't do that. And that's what it's all about. But the problem is, Times, the mainstream media, the corporate media, are owned by the same billionaires who are so psychotically greedy that the idea of a 1% or 2% tax on wealth that's worth £10 million or more is somehow envious. It's insane stuff. To answer your second question, though, is this effective? Of course it's effective, right? One of the paragraphs in that article, it said that the Greens used to be nice, right? We don't want the left to be nice. We don't want the Greens to be nice. That was the problem under the previous leadership, that they were too nice. You want aggressive leadership. And the reason why the attacks are happening, and quite intense attacks, the same as Jeremy Corbyn, by the way, means they're rattled. There was a recent YouGov poll that put the Greens on 15%. Now, of course, we covered the Find Out Now poll that has the Green Party on 15%. Find Out Now often inflates Reform's numbers, which could potentially inflate Green Party numbers too, because obviously, the polling would show Labour loses more support. But a YouGov poll, I mean, that's a well-respected poll, largely, have them on 15%. So the second poll, they're on 15%. There's been a series of polls that put the Greens on 10, 11, 12, 13%. Double the amount of votes they got, or amount of percentage of votes they got in the general election of 6%. Right? They are rattling these people, and they're scared because Zack Polanski is moving the Overton window back to the left, framing everything to economic issues, and not abandoning social issues, by the way. You don't see him do that, but he frames, like Bernie Sanders, he frames everything back to economics, everything back to wealth inequality, and that's popular for people, and the elites, the multimillionaires and billionaires, are fucking shitting themselves.
If you do any combat sport, you whether that's something that's like full contact, well, like boxing or Brazilian jiu-jitsu, or if you do something like chess, you never leave your opponent in a position where they're free to attack you and you can't attack them, right? Attacking is a fundamental part of defense, and I think this is why people are so keen to get behind Zack Polanski, because he's taking the fight to where the right wing are. And if you take the fight to them, ultimately they're not in a position to attack you, and you don't feel like you're in a corner just shield up, just sort of like trying to shield yourself from all the attacks that are constantly coming up, that are hitting you, which I feel like is how a lot of the political left has felt for the past like 5 years at least.
Well, it was Ronald Reagan who said, if you're explaining, you're losing. And the problem for the left historically, and I think the problem for Jeremy Corbyn's Labour leadership, was constantly on the defence, batting away attacks. And even though most of it won't stick, some of it will. But it doesn't really matter what the lie is. All you're seeing through the prism of, ordinary people who are not political nerds like us, right? Turn on the TV for 5 minutes to watch politics and get bored of it. We'll see a man being relentlessly attacked from all corners, constantly defending himself, and people are not going to view you in a good light. They're going to be like, right, okay, well, some of these attacks seem insane, but maybe he's being attacked for a reason. Maybe he's just that bad. And if you're explaining, then you've lost. You don't want to give, like I said, give the upper hand to your political opponent. So what you need to do is define yourself. Right? Don't allow opponents to define you, which is why it's important not just to defend yourself against attacks. You have to go on the attack yourself. And Zack is doing that. If you don't, right, even if you're a very confident, formidable person who's great at debating, but says, I want to play politics nice, I just want to stick to policy, and yes, if there's an attack my way, I'll bat it away. Unfortunately, in today's age, that's still a flaw. You have to go out and attack, because when you do that, the media will then say, for example, Zack attacks reform on this. I mean, when Zack said that Richard Tice is the biggest tit in politics, very funny line, that's in the media, right? And guess what? Richard Tice or the media or Reform or whatever are going to have to respond to that attack. But what people hear is Zack Polanski is on the front foot. He's commanding the debate, even if sometimes it misses and it backfires. He looks like a strong person in command, and that is what is so important, and what the left has really not done for a very, very long time.
Yeah, it was really good to see Zach putting together a press conference. Also, Zoran Mamdani has the most incredible message discipline. Like, we should also be looking to Zoran Mamdani to learn, because every time that Zoran Mamdani is asked a question, I think I may be misremembering, but I think Zoran Mamdani was asked, what do you think about what do you think about the attack on October 7th? Da 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 da. And he said something along the lines of, "Well, I don't know anything about the attack on October 7th. Really, I'm not here to speak on October 7th or Palestine or Israel, but I am concerned about the attacks on affordability for ordinary New Yorkers who can no longer have a city that they can afford to live in." It's just the message discipline on that man is insane. Like, every time he brings it back to affordability.
And sorry to cut you off, even in that instance where someone might have a negative reaction to that, because it's like, oh, we're speaking about October 7th. Like, how dare he speaks about the cost of living, which, I think is important to say, right? Even if someone goes, oh, that makes them look like a bit of an arsehole, that actually doesn't matter. All they're hearing over and over again is freeze the rent, cost of living, freeze the rent, cost of living. So even sometimes when you're delivering a message and people feel like it's in poor taste, or it's not appropriate at the time, or they can see that you're trying to shoehorn in your talking point, that's fine, because if the talking point is there, it's like, for example, really annoying adverts. Go compare, for example, We Buy Any Car. You fucking hate them. When it comes on TV, you're like, shut the fuck up. It's so annoying. But if you want to buy a car or you want to compare insurance, right, you're like, fuck, it's that stupid guy with the mustache. And then you type it in and use their service. So even if you have a politician who keeps on talking about inequality, wealth taxes, billionaires, right? Even if you're watching that going, oh, here we goes again, talking about that, that also doesn't matter, because when it comes to general election time, and then you look at your wage slip and you go, fucking hell, the billionaires are getting away with everything. You'd be like, I don't know if I even really like Zack Polanski, but he's the only one speaking about this. Maybe I'm going to vote for him. Like, message discipline isn't always about coming across well or likable, although I do happen to think that Zack does come across quite likable. That's not the main thing. It's wedging certain political points in your head, just like Reform, right? Stop the boats. Attacks on immigration. These are slogans that even if you were to say a politician, like Rishi Sunak, people are like, oh, he's an arsehole. I don't like the way he's saying this. It doesn't matter. The slogan itself is what's got into the political zeitgeist. And then suddenly people are concerned about stopping the votes. So if everyone speaks about wealth taxes, even if you're not the best communicator, right? Even if you're annoying people, put those ideas on the agenda. Change the political landscape.
Yeah, it does have to be a decent message, though. It can't be some shit like my father was a tool maker. Just
listen. If you're doing better than Keir Starmer, you're already winning. So
it's true.
Although not as hard. So
true. I think we should probably go on to the comments because we are running over a little bit. Apologies about that.
Hello.
Hello.
Really great show. Honestly, loving it. I'm loving it. Right, let's go to our super chats. Stotek.
I always keep looking at that saying Sutek, but it's not. It's got a T in it.
Stotek or Stotek. Yeah, amazing. And then Emma, thank you so much for gifting 5 turn left memberships. You're amazing. And then Rachel gave $2. And this is on the story about trans people and what bathrooms they should be using. And Rachel said, whatever, just wash your hands on public toilets.
Good line.
I think it's a great
sensible line as well. Just wash your fucking hands and leave me alone.
Yeah, wash your hands. And I guess maybe kind of just sticking to that story, we'll go to this comment from Mr. Sweet. Mr. Sweet and Sour. This is a wedge. I don't know if that actually means of, but whatever. Sarah, shut up. This is the wedge issue, right? Dividing and ruling over folks who have more in common. Vis-a-vis.
Vis-a-vis. I think people say it. Yeah. Vis-a-vis. Was it vis-a-vis? I don't know.
Sorry, I'm tired.
You all two are too intellectually for us, intellectual for us.
Too intellectual. Vis-a-vis class and level of wealth / economic status, then what divides, i.e. an opinion on trans rights or whatnot. And I agree, like, it's kind of like what you guys are saying, kind of goes hand in hand with what you were saying with the last story. You know, let's speak about these other things when actually we should be talking about the things that actually matter, which is the things that are impacting a majority of the people. Like, just leave trans people alone. So yeah, I don't think there's much to be said on that, unless you guys wanted to say something.
I did want to add something,
Please do.
and that's that we also need to look for wedge issues among the right and make sure that we're bringing these up. The reason that
Israel.
talking about Israel,
Yeah, Israel's a real sticking point for the right wing.
yeah, but also wealth taxes. It does divide the right wing media class, the talking heads, and their base, because their base quite often is like, well, actually, I think the rich should pay a bit more. I'm against the elites. I don't like elites, and yeah, and dividing them up is one way to do that. So even the wealth taxes stuff is a tactic of division, but we should always be looking for these divisions, because it's our job to go on the attack and look for these wedge issues as well. You know.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the two main thrusts of left wing politics is Israel Palestine and taxes on the rich and inequality. They're the two defining policies of the left. We have the public on side. Yes, majority of people support Palestine over Israel, regardless of bullshit Telegraph polling. The amount of people that go on these marches it's really woken up the consciousness of ordinary people. So you're absolutely right. It's not just battering away wedge issues. It's fucking hammering the right on it. And trust me, Israel's not a good issue for them, especially Tommy Robinson. I mean, there was a recent clip where Tommy Robinson went to Israel, and the person he spoke to, some Zionist Israeli, right, was like attacking British people, and he was just nodding along. It's like, I thought his entire aesthetic was, I love Britain, you know, I'm a patriot, and you've got a fucking Israeli who's saying, yeah, the British people are shit, and he's going, because he doesn't give a fuck about Britain or
Where is
patriotism.
this? We need to do a reaction to this clip, because that's actually quite.
I'll find it. We'll
Yeah.
do a reaction to it. It's brilliant. It's
Yeah.
brilliant.
And just a little, like, I guess, break from seriousness. Edward said, "Are Curtis and Ben the Richard and Judy of the left in media?"
I mean, who's who? Who's Richard? Who's Judy?
That's the big question. This is what we should be talking about. But then Michael said, and I had to star this, Sarah's not involved, so it can't be the dream team. Sorry, guys. Facts, but I'm here just behind the scenes. So
Yeah,
thanks,
Sarah was
Michael.
involved. You just didn't know it yet.
Yeah, so I'm really
we were
happy about
saving Sarah for last.
that.
The most important
Facts.
member for
Yeah.
last.
Correct.
You don't show your best hand and cards, do you? You
No,
wait
this
till
is
the
true.
final point.
Nice save, guys. Now, I kind of want to go to this. This is on the trans issue. Paul said that you were contradicting yourself, Curtis. This
Which
is the most
story?
when you were talking about the surrogate mum.
Mhm.
This is when this comment popped up. This is the most contradictory waffling that I've ever heard from Curtis. It is piffle. Do you have anything you want to say to that?
Well, I want you to explain where I was contradicting myself, because if you just say it's contradicting waffling, I have nothing to go on, do I? So,
exactly.
Paul Johnson, if you're still watching, let
We'd
me
be
know where I've
interested.
contradicted myself, and I'll respond. But at the moment, I don't know how to respond to something if you haven't made an argument yet.
It reminds me often of creationists hearing about evolution for the first time, and they're like, they say silly things like, "Oh, I didn't come from a monkey," and it's like, yeah, that's not what anybody is saying. That's not how evolution works, right? But they've got these kind of like base level understandings, and they can't move beyond that. So anything to, and of course, it would be ridiculous if what we were saying was, "Oh, we were, we evolved directly from, like, I don't know, directly from orangutans or something." Like, no one's saying that. No one's saying that humans one day came about because an orangutan gave birth and outplopped a human. Like,
the thing is,
that's not how it works,
the
right?
average opinion, and this is not trying to shit on people, but I think the average opinion is people think we come from apes rather than being a common ancestor. And I don't think, obviously, majority of people accept immigration, evolution, right? But I think if you were to ask like the majority of people, they'd be like, yeah, we came from apes. So it's like, at least you're on the right side and you accept evolution, but obviously that's not quite the case, is it? I don't know, that's a theory, but I reckon if you were to ask most people.
Yeah, to be fair, most people's understanding of evolution isn't all that great. Most people's understanding of trans issues isn't all that great, which is why, or sex and gender isn't all that great, which is why I think it's such a good analogy for like understanding why people like Paul sort of try and think it through, and then when they can't understand, they're just like, well, it's all nonsense. I don't
Yeah.
understand it. It's self-contradictory waffle. It's like,
Again,
yeah,
and
it
I'm
sounds
not,
like that to you because you
and
don't
I'm not,
understand.
I'm not challenging Paul to be a dick or anything. I'm genuinely asking like where I've contradicted
Where the
myself, because I tell you what, if you
contradictions
can do that, that's only going to help me because I'll just improve my argument. But
True.
yeah.
I think just sticking on Paul, I'm a fan of him. He said,
Oh, he's there again.
Yeah, it's with the Farage story. Now I need someone to make sense of this because I'm not quite sure. Under the Farage scrap ILR example, it would work out less than £1,000 per annum for a foreign person to access the NHS. I don't. Is it? Are they saying per annum for a foreign person?
I don't. What's he said? I don't know.
I don't know.
So
I don't
I
understand.
think what they're saying is that the Farage approach would mean that they applied for citizenship and therefore they wouldn't have to pay pay as much surcharge as if you extend indefinite leave to remain to 10 years. If you scrap it indefinite leave to remain altogether, you then only have to pay the £3,000 surcharge plus your original visa costs, which would be 5,000. But even that's just like ridiculous. We don't need to be deterring people from coming to the country. Like,
Yeah, but I mean, trying to get to the heart of the comment says under his plans, it would cost £1,000 for a foreign person to access the NHS. So it's not even about the visa; it's just the NHS.
It doesn't make
Again,
sense.
Paul, I think you need to clarify
Yeah,
what
so I
you
was hoping
mean.
you guys would make sense of that, but I didn't make sense of it, so neither did you guys. So it doesn't quite make sense. So we'll hide that one. Thanks, Paul, though, for your contributions. So Coop said, Farage is trying to economically bankrupt our country. Immigration keeps our farms, NHS, universities, and most of our social infrastructure keep working. And it's true, I think people need to not underestimate, but also I think Farage knows this. Like, Farage and his cronies know that immigration is something they love. They love it. They pretend they don't love it, but they love it because it means that, it's low labor costs, and that's at the heart of every wealthy person's desire, because it means lining their pockets even more. But he knows that economically this would absolutely harm and Britain. He, more than anything else, I think, is interested in money. So this would be something that would go against that whole ideal. But this is just like what he did with Brexit. Let me just say the things that are great sound bites, but actually I won't implement. And I don't think it's actually something he would legitimately implement, to be honest.
I was just thinking about the. Oh, go on, Curtis.
No, you go first. You go first.
I was just thinking about Brexit, and it's funny how the way that the Brexit campaign was tagged on to more funding for the NHS, right? 300 and what was it, £375 million a year for the NHS, was the slogan that they went with. That is kind of the way that Zack Polanski needs to be tagging social progressivism onto economic progressivism. Use the economic progressivism as the big shiny thing to help people get across, but then move people over to the correct position on trans people, immigration, benefit claimants, through like having the strong economic argument, just like Nigel Farage had the 350 million pound for the NHS, and that got Brexit through, which obviously allegedly made Nigel Farage and his mates a load of money.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that Farage is trying to economically bankrupt our country, because first of all, I reject that you can bankrupt a country. Well, in our instance anyway, because we are very lucky. We have a sovereign currency. We have the Bank of England, which is they say it's independent. How independent is it? What I think he's doing is he wants to bankrupt the state. Two different things. Because at his heart, he's a Thatcherite. He believes in the private realm, and that's it. And he wants to roll back the state. Like, remember, Nigel Farage is nothing different. Nigel Farage and Reform are just the turquoise shade of Thatcherism. Labour is the red shade, the Conservatives the blue shade, and now Reform are the turquoise shade. And their goal, what we've lived under for 45 years, is to simply roll back the state, have more privatisation, because ultimately, whether it's because he's wedded to neoliberalism or whether it's because he wants to create a feudal society. Because even though, ironically, I think capitalism was a welcome development coming out of feudalism, capitalism can also create a feudal society if you have zero regulations on it, because, of course, inequality is growing. And part of that wealth that the working and middle class get isn't just through pay packets, it's through public services. That's part of our wealth. Like the fact that I get free healthcare, right, means more than me getting a pay rise, because that money's just going to be soaked up by NHS costs, right? So I think Farage and his political project is to roll back the state, bankrupt the state, and basically have the state to do as little as possible. And that means getting rid of the NHS, allowing private corporations to do whatever they want. Because at the end of the day, I think he's just a free market extremist who thinks that the free market, the invisible hand of the free market, will always create the right decisions. And what's, again, another layer of irony here is that the person who coined the invisible hand of the free market was Adam Smith, who, by the way, Adam Smith would be considered fucking left-wing today, because even though he was the father of modern capitalism, he was also supportive of restrictions on capitalism when it came to unproductive labor, which is landlordism. Adam Smith despised landlordism, and if he was alive today, he'd fucking hate AI. So it's weird that all these people who looked at Adam Smith, the Adam Smith Institute, for example, looked at these people as their sort of heroes. Adam Smith will hate you too. So he doesn't want to bankrupt the country, because you can't do that. He wants to bankrupt the state and allow private corporations to do whatever they want, and that means the corporations get incredibly, incredibly richer, because it's about power at the end of the day. Nigel Farage is part of the in-group. The in-group, which is the wealthy. The out-group is working class, people of colour, trans people, minorities, white working class, and white middle class, actually. It's basically the 99% versus the 1%.
Also, Adam Smith wrote I think his other book was called A Theory of Moral Sentiments. He wrote a book on morality, basically, and he was always more fond of that particular book, and said that it should come before his economic theories, as in you apply the ethics first, then you apply the economic theory, and yet the right wing never talk about Adam Smith's other works, because it's actually really inconvenient for them. Sorry, Sarah, go on.
No, I don't have anything to say, actually. I think you guys make great points, but I want to show these comments, and then I want you guys to unpack something really quickly. Because I feel like we always get people who agree, but I quite like comments that don't generally agree with us.
Me too.
Yeah, I like it when they disagree, if I'm honest.
Same. So, Carl, I'll go just on envy. We don't need to comment on these, but so annoying how class anger is always framed as envy. Class anger can be justified, and I absolutely agree with that. And this kind of echoes the same thing that Flow Snake says. It's not envy; it's a recognition that someone's nicked our share and we're taking it back. Sorry, establishment, but that's how it's going to be. And it's so true. But this is what I want to unpack slightly. There's a few comments. These people appear to have learned nothing and don't represent British people generally. The left isn't evolving, it's just doubling down on the same opinion they were indoctrinated with despite all the evidence. And then they go on later to say, they're responding to someone else, that the left want more of the same, and that immigration is destroying the UK culturally and economically. So there's a lot there, but it was the same person again and again. So what do you guys say in response to the fact that the left appear to have learned nothing and don't represent British people generally, but and then second to that immigration is destroying the UK culturally and economically? How do you unpack those sorts of comments? Because we get those a lot, not necessarily on YouTube, but a lot on other social media outlets. So I don't know how you guys want to tackle that.
Who wants to go first?
Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, I don't think you can really say, no matter what measurement you use, I don't think you can really say that the left are learning nothing, given that the Green Party are surging in the polling, and your party, whatever you might think of them, had almost 1,000 people register an interest with them. Like, that's not nothing, right? Like, you can say what you like about the the strategic success of the left in the past sort of 5-10 years, and I'd probably agree with some of what you said about the lack of strategic success that the left has had. But I also think it's ridiculous to say that the immigration is what's destroying the UK culturally and economically. I think you could snap and get rid of or you could Thanos snap all of the immigrants in the UK out of existence. and things wouldn't be better for you in your daily life. Things would actually be a whole lot worse, and your fundamental problems would still be the same. You would still be being underpaid. You would your boss would still have control of your life. You would still be being charged masses for your rent, and that rent would be owned potentially by someone overseas. They just don't live in the country anymore, so they still own it. They just own it from overseas. You can't access NHS care, even more so now that all the immigrants are gone. Like I can't see a world in which you can look at everything that's gone on and go, no, the problem isn't the millionaires and billionaire class that have increased their wealth, that have driven austerity, which has torn communities apart. It has literally destroyed communities in this country. 25% cut in local government funding in the past 15 years. You can't look at that. You can't look at all the boarded up shop windows. You can't look at reports of children watching their parents sobbing when the bills come in and trying to hide it from them. You can't look at those reports and say, well, yeah, that's because of immigration. Like I think there comes a point where you have to go, come on, Sean, you're just being a bit thick. And I think that maybe the problem is that strategically, one of the things the left hasn't been doing is we've been a bit too nice. And when people say these things, we should be a bit more like, no, you're just being dumb. Let's talk about billionaires and millionaires if you want to, but we're not going to pretend that immigrants are the problem because we're not stupid.
Well, first of all, the original comment where you said the left has learnt nothing. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's so many things where the left has been a disaster that haven't learned anything. And I think there are many ways today in which the left hasn't learned anything. But you're also kind of making the left as something homogenous. There are so many different ideas within the left. People have different arguments, the way they put forth their policies. I do agree when it comes to immigration, the left has been hopeless on it because we've been terrible at defending immigration. Or I also do think that in some instances, the left has been, have refused to have conversations about immigration. Now, I know my views on immigration. Like, I personally do not see anything wrong with immigration, right? And I'm allowed to have that opinion, by the way. I'm allowed. But I also am happy to have a conversation with someone who says, I've got concerns about immigration, and I'm happy to say, not shut them down as a racist or a bigot or stupid. I'm happy to have that conversation. And I do think in the left, sometimes we can be like that. But first of all, you need to be more specific of what the left is not understanding. The core of left-wing politics, right, isn't really to do with immigration. The core of left-wing politics is understanding who has power, who doesn't have power, and how can we hold power accountable, right? Historically, the left has always stood up against oppression, injustice, economically and socially, right? That is what the left means. And the modern left, and I'm talking the last 200-300 years specifically, has been rooted in class struggle, right? The things we have when it comes to the weekends, the minimum wage, abolishing child labor, right? The 8-hour workday were from unions, which is left-wing class struggle, right? The right wing pushed back on this. So a lot of the things that you enjoy, Sean, is because of the left. And I do agree, yes, the modern left is not seen as the left of yesteryear. Partly because of the media is obviously lying about the left. And I think liberals have really given the left a bad name. Liberals with their liberal identity politics with zero class analysis makes the left look like we only care about social issues. We only care about immigration. And in fact, we care more about immigration than we do about people born in this country, right? That is a view that people hold. And that is not our fault, but also partly our fault that we're not doing better, right? I do think the left have been terrible on immigration in terms of explaining to people, right? But I don't know what you mean by, because one of the comments was the left want more of the same. What is it? Go on.
I think, sorry, mate. I do think also though, like I agree that to some degree a lot of the left has avoided the conversation about immigration, but to be fair, that's more the centre right that's avoided the conversation about immigration. But to be totally fair to the left as a whole, a lot of the framing about immigration is it's similar to when transphobes say, you don't know what a woman is, right? There's a foregone conclusion there when they say they want to have a conversation about immigration, or we can't talk about immigration. What they mean is they can't just say whatever they want and everybody else nods along and agrees with them. Do you know what I mean? There's like, I think we've got to be careful not to mollycoddle the people who like know full well what they're doing, and sometimes you do have to just call people out and go, no, you're just a bit thick.
I mean, yeah, but I think like the majority of people in this country would say they want to reduce immigration, right? That's not particularly a political project of the left, but the majority of people want that. And I have seen people on the left, I mean, even Gareth Stevenson, who might say, or other people might say, let's have a conversation about that, we can shut them down. Again, my personal politics is immigration means, in terms of negative terms, means nothing. I absolutely do not care. I personally think that immigration has enriched this country economically and culturally. But I'm also happy to work with people who have a different view on immigration. I do think that's a problem for the left. And given that where we're going in future politics, like it's something the left needs to grapple with, right?
Yeah.
But of course, there's a difference between someone who completely demonizes immigrants based on race as well, and someone who says, look, you know, an influx of migration in this particular area has had an impact. And we can discuss that, and we can even frame it in economic terms. In fact, Jeremy Corbyn addressed this when he was Labour leader. He said the Migrant Impact Fund has been cut. He even acknowledged that, yes, there are some places in left behind towns where immigration has had a negative impact on local services in the community, but we could have resolved that by not cutting the Migrant Impact Fund. That's a very good argument, because it's not saying, because there'll be people who go, look, I think immigration has impacted this country, and if the left goes, you're lying, or it's bullshit, it's nonsense, that makes us look out of touch. Whereas I like the Jeremy Corbyn one, which is, you're probably right in some areas, but let's make sure there's funding in this. And I know you're not saying that. I'm sort of speaking on the wider left here.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm certainly not saying that like anybody who has like genuine like concerns about the economic impact of migration is like, you know, you should just call them a chuckle fuck. But like, you know, I do think after a certain point, and particularly when you're talking about like immigration destroying the country culturally and economically, I think you're beyond the pale at that point. Somebody does need to give you a shake and go, you're being stupid.
I did also want to respond. Sorry to cut you off. I know I've spoken a lot. It's just that I want to respond to the last thing he said, which is that the left wants the same policies, want more of the same. And what is it? First of all, what's more of the same? This person, Sean, is probably talking about immigration, because once again, the left won't tack immigrants, and we have had high levels of immigration. So in that view, you might say the left wants more of the same. But the left, once again, is more broader than that. In fact, immigration, I think, is a small part of the left. The left isn't pro-high migration. The left is don't blame immigrants. They're two different things. They're two different things, right? You won't find the left say, actually, I want more immigration just because. I've never seen a politician on the left say that. I've never seen a manifesto where it says, we need to increase immigration for fucks, right? They might say we need to increase immigration where we need it, because that's a sensible economic policy. But the left has never called on more immigration. We've simply said, don't blame your problems on immigrants when it's your landlords or it's the billionaire tax evaders. And that's where the left wants a fundamentally different system, because we live under global capitalism. Majority of us on the left are anti-capitalist or post-capitalist. All right, there's some social democrats on the left, but at least they want to radically, maybe not radically, but want to add lots of regulation on unfettered capitalism, right? That's a very different system what we're living under now. So the idea that the left wants more of the same is batshit crazy, I think.
Yeah, I do think obviously you're right. Earlier you said that immigration as an issue is generally not one that favors the left. But there's a reason for that, and it's just because we've allowed the airwaves to be filled with constant bullshit about migration. And I do feel like if we attacked back a bit more, we wouldn't be dealing with a situation where we are on the back foot on immigration all the time. It's only because we've allowed it to get to this point, if you see what I mean. Now that we're here, we have to tack it onto other issues, and then we're fighting from a strong point down, fighting downhill rather than fighting uphill. But I do think that that there is sometimes a need to kind of push back and be a bit more aggressive. If you look at the way that Donald Trump operates, and I'm not saying imitate Donald Trump in a lot of ways, because in a lot of ways Donald Trump is shit, but he says the most like the most he goes after his opponents so hard, and it attracts attention, and we're living in the attention world, the attention economy. When Zack Polanski called Richard Tice a tit, right? It's obviously it's like it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have like it's not, no one's going to hear it and go, oh well, I think that's a really strong argument in favor of Zack Polanski. It's just about pushing back.
But I don't think, and I think I blame the Liberals for this. The Liberals have been the loudest voice over the last 15, 20 years of defending immigration. But I'm not convinced, right? Entirely convinced anyway, by simply saying, don't worry about immigration. The problem is the 1%, right? The problem is the 1%. But I think that isn't convincing people anymore. And again, a lot of it is Liberals when we say we must defend migration in a way that we don't explain how. And what I mean by that is what I said before, which is that the left isn't here to say we want more immigration. The left is here to say we're not going to scapegoat immigration, and they're two different things. Because I do think it's important to dispel the myth that the left love mass migration, right? The left has never supported mass migration or open borders, right? We don't have open borders, right? You get checked, right? That's the definition of not having an open border. But also, sometimes our argument is undermined when people say, well, the freedom of movement has undercut wages. And our response haven't been good enough by simply saying, well, actually, let me pull up these statistics that shows actually it's not had a negative causality on wages, blah, 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 blah. We remember we don't operate on facts in today's age. So I think the left's, again, probably mostly for Liberals, the left have been bad at arguing for immigration. We need a better way of doing it. Of course, it is in the face of corporate media after corporate media after corporate media of migrant bashing. So it's not like it's easy. I'm not blaming us for being bad at it, but I don't think we've been good enough. And simply saying, like, stop blaming immigrants, it's just these people. Sure, but I don't think that's convincing many people, especially when people go, but I agree that the rich should pay their fair share of taxes, but I also want to see immigration go down. How do we convince that person? I'm not sure. And obviously I'm open to ideas, and this is why I'm having this conversation.
I think you've got to make the cost of living and affordability at the front of absolutely everything, and I think that's probably where where the conclusion is. I also think you've got to point to real world examples. You've got to point to Spain, where they have vocational training schemes, and it's been massively successful. Yeah. They've seen massive economic growth, and they're schemes that can benefit both immigrants and refugees, for example, and say war veterans. So have a war veterans and refugees scheme to give both the same mental health care support, because a lot of those people are going to have seen a lot of the same things. They're going to have seen bloody war crimes being committed. They're going to have seen bombs going off. They're going to have seen things that require treatment for PTSD, and so putting them through the same schemes kind of makes sense. And you can tack the refugees on by making it about the veterans as well, if you see what I mean. We should probably end the show, because we have
just one more. Sorry.
Oh yeah, go on.
A £20 donation.
Oh, blimey!
Wow,
yes.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Coops. And this is the final question. It's not even related to anything that we've spoken about today, but I have to ask this question after the success of the full day of your show a few weeks ago. I heard Canary are looking to start a left-wing channel in opposition to DB News. Please tell us you will have a space on this.
I mean, I could probably speak about this.
Yes, please.
Yes. So, word in the pipeline is the Canary, my former employer, is starting a left-wing channel to combat GB News, like a TV channel. And by the way, this is a fucking media revolution. This has never been done before, by the way. Obviously, big up independent media, of course, but there's that sense of legitimacy when it comes to TV. And even though legacy media is dying, I think specifically like the BBC and stuff, and maybe like Channel 4 and ITV, but I don't think that media on TV is completely dying, because GB News has a lot of success. So the idea that there's a left-wing TV channel is really exciting. That is what the Canary are doing. Now, from what I do know, and we will cover this in the future, Steve Topple one of the main editors at the Canary said, it's not going to be the Canary TV and everything's the Canary. It's going to be a left-wing channel, don't know the name of it, where there's going to be multiple different left-wing media organizations on it. Now, no one said officially to us, like, do you want to be part of it? No. But of course, we're friends with them, and we'd absolutely support some kind of collaboration. Of course, it'd be insane not to. But there's still development going on. There's still talks. But yeah, I mean, I would check. I think Steve Topple for the Canary went on the Crispin Flintoff show. Maybe go check that out because he speaks about it more in detail. But yeah, that's the development on a potential left-wing TV channel.
I think the success or failure of a TV channel today, a new TV channel, is largely going to be based on how good are they at taking the content that's broadcast on TV that realistically not a lot of people are going to watch, especially to begin with. Most people don't watch GB News live. Most people see GB News because they get clips of it on their Facebook, on their Twitter, on their YouTube. And their ability to farm clips is going to be, I think, what makes the difference on whether it takes off or not. Just an interesting, technical point, I think.
That's a good point. Yeah, and I think we'll end the comments there. Thank you so much, guys. Really, really great show.
Superb. Thank you very much, Sarah. And thank you very much for coming on, Curtis. I like to think that we do always put on a good show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, us two or just turn left? Who we're bigging up ourselves, man.
Just just us two, not Sarah. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. Of course. Yeah, she's not going to move me now. That's all. No, thank you for coming on, Curtis. I really do appreciate it. And with that, please don't forget to help us out if you can, whether that's monetarily or just by liking and sharing the stream. Sending love out to you all now. You've been watching Turn Left Media's Normal Ireland show with episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Have a wonderful evening.